Welcome to episode 3 of For the Love of Food. I'm your host, Cathy Braner. I am very excited about today's show because today I'll be sharing with you one of the menus that my family enjoyed on our Sunday family dinners with my aunts and my grandfather. I mentioned that my Aunt Lil was an awesome cook. She was also a nurse and she worked for an Italian doctor. And he was gracious enough to share with her his family recipes. So today I'm going to share with you Aunt Lil's spaghetti sauce, her Braciole, and we'll have a little sweet treat of Pizzelles. So let's get started with the sauce. The star of the sauce is pork neck bones. So we're going to start by browning our pork neck bones. So I have about 3 pounds of pork neck bones, and you can, if you only find 2 pounds, that's fine. Anywhere between 2 and 4 pounds of pork neck bones is what I'm going to start with. And what's important with this process is that we dry off the moisture from the pork neck bones. So anytime you're browning any kind of meat, I like to take a paper towel and just blot it to get off that moisture. So I'm going to take these over to the stove as I'm blotting them. And I've got a pot with some olive oil in it, and we're going to just start browning our pork neck bones. Now, when you go to find pork neck bones, I find that it's very easy to find them in the Chicago area. I know I was visiting my friends Stephanie and Scott and AJ, Michaelin, and Luke in Phoenix, and I was going to make them the spaghetti sauce, and we had a hard time finding pork neck bones in Phoenix. But if you can't find pork neck bones, you can substitute country-style ribs, pork ribs. The real important thing is that you find some type of cut of pork that has bones in it, and you need to have some of the fat on it too, so that it could that fat can be rendered as part of the sauce. So we're just getting our pork neck bones in there. Once again, I had a tablespoon of oil that I had heating up in our pot. And next what I'm going to do is season these pork neck bones. In the Chicago area, I find it pretty easy to find the pork neck bones. I have found them at Jewel, I found them at Mariano's, and I found them at a local store in Naperville called Casey's. So I think if you live in Chicago, you should be able to find them. If not, no worries. You can go ahead and use country-style pork ribs or some other type of cut of pork that has the bones in it. So we're going to start with a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and we're just going to season the pork neck bones. Okay, so there's our salt and our pepper. We're also going to add to that some garlic powder, and we're going to do 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Okay, so at this point we're really just going to wash our pork neck bones. We're going to let them get really nice and brown, and we're going to keep turning them so that each side can be browned. After we do that, we are going to add in some tomato sauce. So I have 4 cans of, this is what my Aunt Lil used to use. She used Hunt's tomato sauce. So you'll see these are 4 29-ounce cans. So this makes a pretty large batch of spaghetti sauce, but you can freeze this sauce if you don't use it all. So we're going to wait until those pork neck bones are thoroughly browned, and we'll go ahead and we'll add in our sauce. So I'm going to take a look and see how they're coming along. Okay, we're going to need a little bit more browning on those. I'm going to turn them up a little bit. So while those are browning, I'm going to start with our Braciole. So Braciole is a steak that is filled with a seasoned breadcrumb filling with some Parmesan. The flank steak is rolled with that seasoning in it, and then it's wrapped with kitchen twine. It's going to cook in the sauce we just made, and when it's fully cooked, we're going to slice it, and you'll have pinwheels of steak with the breadcrumb stuffing in the middle of it. So they are delicious. They really aren't that hard to make. With this sauce, the sauce is really simple too. It's one of those things where you just need time. You just need to be home for a few hours so that you can let this sauce simmer. I did want to mention that once we add our tomato sauce, we are going to let the sauce simmer for about 3 hours. I let mine sauce this morning probably about 4 hours, so you can let it between 3 and 4 hours for the pork to get really tender until it's almost falling off the bones, okay? So let's start with our flank steak. So for the flank steak, and it's called Braciole, we're going to start with our breadcrumb stuffing. I have a half a cup of seasoned breadcrumbs. Now, typically, I just keep regular breadcrumbs at home, and I add my own seasoning. So I could add oregano, I could add basil, I could add thyme to this. So we're going to do our half a cup of our breadcrumbs. I also have a half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese, so I just took my block and grated it. And then we're going to do a quarter cup of chopped parsley. And to that, we're going to add 2 garlic cloves that are minced. Now let's go check our pork neck bones. I hear them sizzling back here. We're also going to add, as these pork neck bones, notice how they're starting to get, I'll show you one of them, they're starting to get a nice brown to them. We're going to also add to these some diced onions. I wanted them to start rendering some of that fat before I added the onions. So now that we have turned those and they're getting a nice brown on them, I'm going to add in the onion. This is about half of a large diced onion. We'll just mix those around. Let the onion start browning too. The other reason I don't like to add the onions immediately is they let off some moisture, and you want that pot not to have too much moisture in it so that your neck bones would brown nicely. So we flip those. We're going to try to turn them a few more times to get all of the sides brown. All right, so back to our Braciole. I'm also going to add, we did our breadcrumbs, we did our Parmesan cheese, we did our parsley, and our garlic. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of dried oregano.
Miriam says hello from Florida.
Hi Miriam, thank you for joining us. I have a half a teaspoon of dried basil.
I missed that. Dried basil.
Dried basil, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Once again, this is really pretty simple for a filling, and we're just going to give this a little stir, make sure that that minced garlic gets evenly distributed. Now you'll notice that this is pretty loose. So what my Aunt Lil used to do is she used to take an egg and she would beat the egg, and then she would add the egg to this mixture to bind it. So I'm going to take one egg that I've beaten, and I'm going to just start adding some of it to it. And I'm just going to kind of see how much egg I think I need in this mixture, just to kind of get it so that it binds together a little bit better and it's not so loose. And I'm going to just go ahead and finish and put my entire egg in there. The other thing Aunt Lil said is that she would add a little milk to it too. So I'm going to check our neck bones one more time, give our onions a little stir. Okay, so see, that's the other side, so that's looking nice and brown. I'm going to leave those for, probably just give them a little turn on the other sides, because you'll see I have the little sides that still are a little pink, so I'm just going to stand them on their ends so that we can get every side nice and browned. That'll give our onions a little more time to cook. So we're just moving them around, standing them up. See how nice of a brown we're getting though? So you just kind of have to lean them, however, to keep getting them brown.
Dodie says hi.
Hello, Dodie. Okay, so we're gonna let those go for a little bit longer. Keep turning them so all the sides are nice and brown. So I mentioned that Aunt Lil would also add a little bit of milk to her breadcrumb stuffing. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of milk just to moisten it up. We're probably talking about a tablespoon or so of milk. Okay. And that's it. That is it for our stuffing.
We got a cool face from Rick Vodka. Rick Vodka was a high school Maine East demon, as we used to call ourselves.
Go Demons. Okay, I'm gonna check the other side of these one more time. These are almost done. Okay. So let's go back to our Braciole. We have our filling ready. Now we get to actually prepare our steak. So for this, I have about between 1.5 and 2 pounds of flank steak. And this one I think is about 1 3/4 pounds. But what we have to do is we need to flatten it. You want it to be about a 1/2 inch thick before you fill it. So what I like to do is take some plastic wrap, and I am just going to take a big piece, put it on my counter as the bottom sheet, and then I'm going to do another sheet and I'm going to put it on top so that I can use my meat mallet and I can flatten my flank steak. And you're going to see how thick it is, and it's pretty amazing how it's going to thin out after we do it. Before we start our flank steak though, let's go ahead and add our tomato sauce into our pot with our neck bones. Okay, so we have those pork neck bones, they're all browned. We have our onion, and now we're going to take those 4 cans and we're going to add them into the sauce.
Amy and Scott say hi, and Linda Lane wants to know why we haven't figured out how to bring the smell forward in the Facebook Live video.
Oh, you are so right, Linda. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining us.
Really good right now, guys.
So you'll see this is quite a bit of sauce. If you really just don't need this quantity of sauce, you could easily do the exact same thing and only use 2 cans. Sometimes I only use 3 cans. So I'm just going to give this a little mix.
Doty's saying that Larry loves Braciole, enjoys seeing your techniques and how they are the same and or different from ours.
Awesome. Hi, Larry.
Isn't that the cool part about cooking? You know, just sharing ideas.
It is. So I'm also going to add, now that I have my tomato sauce added, I'm going to add in some basil. And this is a personal preference. I think I'm going to go with about a tablespoon of basil right now. And we're also going to add in a little bit of sugar. So as you know, the tomato sauce is pretty acidic. So to cut through that acidity, we're going to add in some sugar.
Rick Vodka is asking, is there a reason why you would use sauce instead of whole tomatoes?
You can use whole tomatoes. You can use tomato puree. It's really a personal taste. My kids do not like chunks of tomatoes, and this is how my Aunt Lo made it. So this is what we use. But if you prefer tomatoes, you can take cans of like San Marzano tomatoes and you can crush them with your hands. So that is totally fine. I think it's more the texture that you prefer. I'm also adding 2 tablespoons of sugar. This, once again, is to cut through that acidity of the tomato sauce. This is also, I think, a personal preference. Before we actually eat this, I'm gonna taste it and I'm gonna see whether or not I want more sugar in it or not. So we're just gonna start with that. And then we are going to cover this, and this is going to simmer for about 3 hours. And literally what's gonna happen is that pork is gonna become so tender, it's gonna fall off the bones. There are times where when I'm going to serve it, I have to make sure there aren't little pieces of bones because I've let it cook so long. So that pork gets really tender, it just falls off the bone. And I'll show you another trick to the pork in a little bit. Okay, so our sauce is good. We're gonna just move it here and we're gonna let it simmer. And we're gonna finish with our Braciole.
So how long is this cooked for? 3 to 4 hours?
Yes,
right?
so
Okay.
I like to let it cook for at least 3 hours till those pork neck bones are really tender. The meat just starts falling off the bones. Sometimes I let it go for 4 hours. You're probably pretty good at 3 hours. So let's move on to our Braciole. So we have our stuffing, and I mentioned that we are going to now use my meat mallet or my meat tenderizer to flatten this flank steak. So I have a flank steak that is, I said, about 1 3/4 of a pound. You could do this with a 1 1/2 pound flank steak. You can do it with a 2-pound flank steak. But I'm going to show you just what that flank steak looks like before I start with it. So you'll see the size of it, and I'm going to show you, later, it's kind of slippery. I'm going to show you later what happens to it after we use the meat tenderizer on it. So you can see how thick it is. So I'm going to take my plastic wrap and I'm going to put my second piece of plastic wrap on top of it. And I'm going to start using my meat tenderizer. Now this is a very good way to work out your frustrations during the coronavirus. I am going to literally start pounding it, and I apologize, this is going to be loud, but it is going to take a bit of time for us to do this. So while I use my meat mallet, I am going to tell you another thing about those pork neck bones. So my Aunt Lil, when she shared the recipe with us, and by the way, I have Aunt Lil's handwritten recipe for the spaghetti sauce, for meatballs, and for the Braciole. So that is one of my most favorite keepsakes. As you know, I love recipes, and I love that when I have a recipe of a loved one who's no longer with us, it just makes me feel close to them, and when it's in their handwriting, it's even more special. So that is Aunt Lil's recipe. You'll notice though in her recipe that it doesn't have any quantities. So for her Braciole, it literally says breadcrumbs, parsley, egg, Parmesan cheese. So it took a little bit of experimenting to understand the quantities of each of those. So you can see just by using our meat mallet, this is really starting to become whiter and longer. So I'm just going to keep, at this point I'm going to flip it over. So I like to do both sides. So I just flip it. See how much bigger it's gotten already? I mean, you could just see just in that amount of time how much bigger it's gotten. And I'm going to just keep with my meat mallet. So what I wanted to share about the pork neck bones, and my sisters are going to get a little chuckle about this because Aunt Lil would say that after the meat is tender on the pork neck bones and your sauce is ready, that you can actually take the pork and pull the pork off the bone and add it to the sauce. So my mom was one of the most patient people I know, and she had the patience of sitting there and pulling the pork off those bones. And my sisters and I always, tease ourselves that we are all not as patient as she was of doing that little task of picking the pork off the bones. But I actually saved my pork neck bones from my first batch that I made this morning, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so our meat is getting a lot thinner. I like to get it, at least a ½ inch. A lot of times I like to go even thinner than that. So I'm going to keep working at our Braciole. Once again, this is really, if you're frustrated with our current situation, this is
It's therapeutic,
nice way.
huh?
Yes, it's very therapeutic. If you don't have a meat tenderizer, you can use anything heavy, you know, maybe a cast iron pan, something that has some weight to it that you can use to, so you can see how different this meat looks compared to. So not only are we making it thinner, we're also tenderizing it as we're doing this. So I think we're at a good place right now.
So just to be clear, what does the end of that tenderizer look like that you're
So there's two sides of it. One is very fine and one's a little thicker. I use both of them
Okay.
while I'm doing it. So there we go.
Okay. Next up.
We are good. All right. So now we are ready to actually fill our steak with our breadcrumbs. So I'm going to go ahead and take our filling now. And literally we are just going to take it and put it on top of our meat. You want, when you're doing this, you do want to keep your filling about an inch from the edge of the steak, because as you fill it, as you roll it, you're gonna find that the filling is gonna start falling out of it. So I usually try to keep it about an inch from the end of it. This is kind of therapeutic too. And once again, I know there's I don't know what Larry and Dodie use for their filling, but this is another place, just kind of like the grandma's meat rolls that I did on the first show. You can do, you know, little variations to the filling to your liking. So it'd be fun to kind of experiment.
I've seen cheeses.
Yeah, Parmesan is in this one already, but you can do literally like slices of provolone. That's been done before. All right, so we have our filling in, and we have it about an inch away from our sides, and now we're gonna start rolling it. So we are gonna roll it this way, and I'm gonna start from the small side, and you're literally just rolling it, and you know, just keeping an eye on that filling and making sure that the filling is staying put. I've got a little bit sneaking out, so I'm gonna just grab it and add it back in. And there we have our braciole. Of course, we need to tie this because this is not gonna stay together. So I have some kitchen twine right here. And I'm gonna start with the piece in the middle just to get me centered a little bit. And I'm just gonna take some twine and tie it. And then I've got 5 more pieces. I'm gonna go to this end because it seems to be wanting to come undone. And I'm gonna tie this piece as close to the end as possible. And then I'll do the same with my last 3 pieces, just so that we keep this together enough while we cook it. So what we're gonna do when we cook this is we're gonna actually cook it on top of the stove in the sauce. Now, what I typically do is I cook my sauce first. So my sauce is fully cooked and I've removed the pork neck bones. And then I add the braciole to it. But before we do that, we're gonna brown the braciole.
Dodie is saying we use bacon, Romano cheese, raisins, parsley, garlic, and pine nuts.
Ooh, that sounds very good, Dodie. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sure with, depending, Dodie, was that, is Larry's family from Sicily or southern Italy? Do you know? Let's see what Dodie says.
So how much heat are you doing there? Medium heat?
So now I'm doing a medium-high heat, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put some olive oil in this pan again, and we're gonna do the same thing to the flank steak, to the braciole. We're gonna brown it on each side before we put it into the sauce.
Okay.
So we will get the olive oil in the pan.
So no Naples and Calabria.
Okay.
First you said napkins or something like that, but I knew what you meant, Dodie.
Okay. So I'm turning my sauce down a little bit. It's starting to bubble a little bit. So while I'm waiting while I'm waiting for the oil to heat for my braciole, I'm going to show you what I meant about those pork neck bones. So these are the pork neck bones that have been in the sauce for at least 3 hours, if not 4 hours. And literally, you just take the pork neck bone, and you'll see there's some of the pork meat on there. So my aunt and my mom would take the pork and just shred it with their fingers, and then they would put this back into the sauce. So I would recommend that you try this step after your pork is fully cooked. You gotta let it cool off first. You could just take those pork neck bones, and there are really, nice pieces of pork still on those bones. Just shred it with your fingers and then throw it into your sauce. It adds a really nice texture to the sauce. I have another funny story when Scott and Stephanie were in town once, and I was making the spaghetti sauce for them. I had my pork neck bones sitting on the counter, and they had been sitting out there for probably more than a couple hours. I just hadn't done anything with them yet. And Scott Elliott walks by, he picks up a pork neck bone, and he starts just eating the meat off of it. So I always smile when I'm making spaghetti sauce and I'm taking my pork neck bones out, because I think of Scott and how he just picked up the pork neck bone and started chowing on it. So I would recommend that piece of it. I think it adds a nice touch to your sauce. All right, so let's add that braciole now that our oil is going good. Okay, so you're gonna hear a nice sizzle as we put that down. And we're gonna do the same process. We are just gonna continue to turn that braciole on all 4 sides so that we can get a nice brown sear on each of the sides. Okay. So while we do wait for that to brown, I'm gonna start with the pizzelle. Okay, so for our pizzelles, we are going to first start with eggs and some sugar. I'm going to plug in my pizzelle iron.
I'm going to come around here because I'm getting the brightness in the background there.
Okay, I could shift it this way.
Yeah, that would help.
Okay, so we're going to start with our pizzelles, and I have a great story about the pizzelles too. We start with 3 eggs and a half a cup of melted butter. Okay.
So Julie Carson joined a little late. Did you pound the steak thin? Yes, we did.
Yes.
To about between a quarter and half an inch, would you say?
Yeah, I do at least a ½ inch. I like it to go maybe even a little thinner than that. And just since you weren't able to see it, I took my meat tenderizer. I put a piece of plastic wrap below it, one on top of it, and I just kept pounding to flatten the meat. So we've got 3 eggs. These are our pizzelles. So if you haven't had a pizzelle is basically an Italian cookie that is somewhat like a waffle, like a thin waffle, okay? So we are gonna do 3 eggs and 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And we are gonna just mix this for about 2 minutes until it is nice and light in color. And then we'll take a break and we'll check on our braciole and see how our first side is looking. Okay, look at that. See that nice brown? That's what you're looking for. You want that nice sear on that meat. So we're going to do each side like that. And continue with our... These really are somewhat simple to make. Once you toss everything in the bowl and you mix it, then it's a matter of just putting it in the iron. So this meal is fun because I mentioned that my Aunt Lil, who was my mom's sister, she was the nurse that had the Italian doctor she worked for, and this is how we have the braciole and the spaghetti sauce in our family. The pizzelles were actually from my dad's side of the family. My Aunt Helen, who is my dad's sister, she had a pizzelle iron and she really enjoyed making pizzelles. So it's a fun meal. Although I'm 100% Polish, it's fun that we have the Italian traditions on each of our sides. So I'm going to go ahead and add some vanilla extract. I'm going to do about 2 teaspoons, and I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to do 2.5 teaspoons. If you prefer, traditional pizzelles are actually used with anise extract. It's kind of a licorice flavor. So we've got our vanilla. We're going to add a teaspoon of lemon zest. So just take your zester and add your lemon zest in. That gives it nice flavor. And then I have a 1/2 cup of melted butter that I let cool. So we're going to add the melted butter in.
Julie Carlson says, my grandmother always made sugo with pork neck bones. I wonder if that's a type. I don't know what that is.
Tell us more, Julie. What is that? So there's our other side. See the nice stir on that one? We've got 2 more to go. Okay, so we have our eggs, our sugar, our vanilla, our lemon zest, and our butter. Now we have to add our dry ingredients. And in this bowl, I have 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and then I have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So we're going to add all of our dry ingredients in. And that is it for the pizzelles. That is the total ingredient
It gets
list.
pretty thick, doesn't it?
It does get pretty thick, yes. So I have a cookie sheet with a baking rack on top of it so that once they are done, and I'm going to flip my meat one more time. Look at that. And I've got my Pizzelle iron preheating. This is one of those things too where, you know, sometimes the first ones, just like with pancakes, they may not turn out as well. You just need to make sure that Pizzelle iron is warm enough. I usually take a little butter and I butter it to try to get them to not stick too. So I think we're good with our Pizzelle batter. Let's check our Braciole one more time. We'll do a little bit more on that side and then we are good to go. Okay, so we can start with our Pizzelle iron. So you want to take about a tablespoon. These get really hot. Take about a tablespoon. So you'll see there's our iron, and they're really pretty. They're like snowflakes. And we're gonna start with about a tablespoon. I just use my little mini scooper. And you know, it's one of those things where every time I make these, I have to experiment with how much to put on because they're gonna ooze out a little bit. So we're gonna wait about a minute, and I have to show you something that Dave's grandmother's Pizzelle iron. So check this out. This is a Pizzelle iron that you would hold over an open flame. And this was his grandma Braciole's. And we even have the box that she stored it in. And this is what I love because on the box, she wrote her Pizzelle recipe. So this is her Pizzelle recipe. And she has other recipes written on the back. Sister Mary's Cencenaro Pizzella. So this was her box that she stored it in, and these are her recipes that she wrote on the box. So it's kind of fun because Dave's family had the Pizzelle iron in its family too. So our flank steak is done, okay? Let's check our first Pizzelle. Okay, they're looking good. So literally, look how beautiful those are. They are patterned like snowflakes. As soon as you take them off, you want to put them on a baking rack to cool. They are soft and flexible at this moment, but they are going to harden and become crisp. And then we are going to just put a little powdered sugar on them.
People are liking my grandma. Actually, her maiden name was Fernetti, so her Pizzelle maker.
So the other thing that is kind of a neat idea, these are cannoli tubes. So if you ever wanted to make homemade cannolis, you can make the cannoli dough and then you wrap it around the tube and you deep fry these. But if you wanted to, you could take the next Pizzelle that comes off the Pizzelle iron. We're gonna wrap it around the cannoli tube while it's still warm. And then we could have a Pizzelle in a roll that we can fill with something. Okay? So we'll do that when the next one comes off. Like I said, these are really great treats. You'll see now it has become hard. It's not as pliable as it was. And we're just gonna take powdered sugar and we're just gonna sprinkle a little powdered sugar on top of them. And Dave's gonna go ahead and try one.
Yum. Yum, yum, yum.
They are really good. I mean, I know you have to have a Pizzelle iron for them, but they are really a special, unique treat. They're light, they're crisp. So now let's try these where we're gonna go ahead and wrap one around the cannoli tube and see how this goes. So we're just gonna wrap it. Oh, it's really hot though, and I'm gonna let it sit there and hopefully it'll take its form. So that is the process for these cannolis. We're just gonna keep making cannolis, but I wanted to go ahead and show you the end product of the Braciole. So I have a Braciole that I'm gonna take out for you. So this is where I made my sauce already, and I made my Braciole, and my Braciole cooked in that sauce for between 1.5 and 2 hours, and we are going to take it out so you could see what the inside of our Braciole looks like. Okay, so you could see it was cooking in the sauce. I still have my twine on it. And we are going to take our knife and we are going to do a slice so you can see what the inside is.
Hold on, guys.
Let me turn it this way for you.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, can you see that pinwheel? So you can see the pinwheel with our breadcrumb stuffing in the middle. And then you're gonna get your pieces of twine. So there you have it. There you have your Braciole. There, that's a good shot right there. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep slicing it. And then what I like to do is I like to serve it with my pasta with some sauce on it. So today I'm serving it with bucatini. My Aunt Lil used to serve her pasta. She used angel hair pasta, but today we're using bucatini for the pasta. So we'll use our homemade spaghetti sauce and serve it with our Braciole. Now I'm gonna have Matthew take a little taste of it. It's very tender.
Hold on, guys. Camera just went wild. Sorry, guys.
And I want to
Is that
show you,
right?
so here's in the sauce. Remember I told you about the pork that I took off the neck bones? You could see the nice texture that adds to your sauce. So there you have it. You have my Aunt Lil's homemade spaghetti sauce for Braciole, which was the flank steak with the breadcrumb filling, and then our sweet treat, our Pizzelles, our Italian cookies. So I hope you have an opportunity to try these recipes. Thank you for joining us for The Love of Food. Bye.
Everybody's saying thank you. Looks delicious. So, all right, thanks, guys. And yes, I am a lucky man. Take care, guys.